Okay, in this first video, we're going to start taking a look at the ZIO HTTP library. And I have some notes in this section here, and I want to cover those before we get into some code that I have down here below. So let's go ahead and start working on those notes. So ZIO HTTP is built on top of ZIO, leveraging its power for managing effects, fibers, and concurrency, which we've talked about before. It's also built on top of Netty, and I made some notes here that if you're not familiar with Netty, it's written with Java NIO, the non-blocking I/O library, and it's used by an awful lot of different companies, including Apple, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Square, Instagram, and more. This line I grabbed from the documentation. ZIO HTTP is designed in terms of HTTP as a function, which I think is a really important point right there. So you could think of an HTTP call as being a function from a request to a response. Now, all operations are asynchronous and non-blocking by default. As you'll see, there's minimal boilerplate in the code. It has a declarative and hopefully intuitive DSL. ZIO HTTP provides a request object to handle incoming data, and that's things like headers, query parameters, and the body, and a response object to construct outgoing messages. Routing is another big part of ZIO HTTP, and it is declarative, functional, and pattern-based. And you'll see all of that in just a few minutes. Let me scroll down here a bit more. ZIO HTTP supports typed error channels, just like everything else in ZIO. And this gives us really nice fine-grained control over error handling. It also includes middleware for common use cases like logging, authentication, and compression. And this is really cool. Middleware is a composable way to wrap HTTP routes with additional behavior. So in the code, look for the @ symbol that you'll see in future examples. And I'm pretty sure I will remember to say when you see that symbol that now we're talking about middleware. ZIO HTTP has built-in WebSocket support for bidirectional communication. And just like other ZIO libraries, we configure the ZIO HTTP server using zlayer, and a lot of people like to call that dependency injection. When you need to, ZIO HTTP can serve static files directly from the file system, and it also integrates seamlessly with other ZIO libraries. And you'll see quite a bit of this in the examples that I'll show after this initial video. And then I have some notes here that I should show these other documentation pages, so bear with me just a moment. Let me grab those and bring them over here. So these are the 3 pages I wanted to show. And if you look at the URL here, you can see where you can find ZIO HTTP. And I believe I covered all these points right here. This was the one where we had ZIO HTTP is designed in terms of HTTP as a function. And again, on the server side, you can think about that as being a function from a request to a response. And I think I covered most of the things down here. I didn't really talk about it being cloud native, but ZIO HTTP is designed for cloud native environments. And if you're interested, you can look on the internet and you will find some nice studies about how scalable and performant ZIO HTTP is. I covered most of these other points. I didn't talk about testing. I did not talk about JSON, but we'll see that in the examples that are coming up. But again, this is the Getting Started page. I wanted to show the middleware just really quickly, and I'll probably come back to this in a future video, but I wanted to show what middleware looks like. So this may not make any sense yet, but I just wanted to show that this is what I was talking about with the @ symbols. So basically I'm saying that I have my application here is defined as a set of routes right there. And then what I say down here is that I want to combine those routes, that application as a series of routes, with this debugging middleware, and this will give us some more capabilities. And we'll see that in just a minute, but what I want to note right now is when we talk about middleware, it really does get in the middle of everything, and I mean that in a good way. So we have a request coming in, and you can have middleware work on that request. After that, the request continues to the server, and that's where we have our routes and our handlers. So then we work on our response here on the server side, and we return a response. But then the middleware can also intercept that response, do whatever it wants to, and then send that back to the client right over here. So that's a quick glance at what middleware is, and we'll be seeing this again in the examples that are coming up. And then the third page I wanted to show you was this one on a request handler. So a handler is responsible for processing the matched incoming request, and we generate an appropriate response. So a handler is a function that takes a request and produces a response. So they have a note here. This is a crucial component of how ZIO HTTP determines how the server should respond to a request that's matched by the corresponding route pattern. So this was a note that I thought was really interesting, which brought me to this page. In ZIO HTTP, each route that we're going to define consists of a route pattern and then a handler. And the route pattern is responsible for matching the method, such as the get method or post method, and then the path or URI of the incoming request. And then the handler specifies the corresponding action that should be taken when the request is matched. And we are going to start looking at this part in just a moment or two. And indeed, as we come back to our example over here, this code that you're about to see is going to be our first server. So it's going to be a hello world ZIO HTTP server. And once we get the first part of the server going, I'll add a couple of changes in it below to show more route details or other things that we can do. And I'll also show how to respond using text and a JSON response. I'm going to test the application with curl. So these are some curl commands that you're going to be seeing in just a few moments. And that's about enough to get us started. So this area right here is going to be our first ZIO HTTP server-side application. So the way we do this is just like other ZIO applications. We create an object, give it a name, and it extends ZIO app default. So you've seen that in many previous videos now. And then the next thing you do in ZIO HTTP is you define this thing called a route. So if I hover over that, you'll see that hello route has this type. It's a route and it has the type any and nothing. And because you're watching this video, I'll assume that you're familiar with the ZIO type. So you've seen any and nothing before. Any means we can accept any environment, or we don't have any special environment needs. Any old environment will do. And nothing means we can't fail over here. This portion of the code over here cannot fail. So that's what that means. So again, what we're doing in this code right here is we are creating a route. And I talked about the route pattern before. And the route pattern is this portion of the code. So if you remember what I mentioned earlier, let me bring that back actually over here. See if we get all this in here at one time. So I noted over here that each route consists of a route pattern and a handler. So this part right here is the route pattern, and it consists of the method, and in this case it's the get method, and then it consists of the path that we want to match, or I always call this a URI, so you'll probably hear me refer to that as a URI. But in the documentation, they refer to that as a path, and that's of the incoming request right there. And then the right side of this symbol right here is the handler, and that's what they're talking about here. The handler specifies the corresponding action to take when this route pattern is matched. So all I want to do in my handler is just say, I want to give you a text response back, and the text response I'm going to give you is this string right there. And grasping this part right here is really important. It's really the basics of ZIO HTTP. And I want to stress this a little bit more. I forgot about this part. What I want to do over here is, let's get that started. I want to mention this symbol right here before. You have seen this before. What I can do right here is just type that symbol like that. Just as a quiz for yourself, before I hit enter, what do you think is going to be the result of that? What do you think is going to be the type and the value when I hit enter right there? So that's a little quiz, and I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that what that is it's a two-element tuple right there. The first element in the tuple is an int, and the second element is a character. So that's the first part I want to stress to you, is that what we're doing over here is actually creating a tuple. But if that doesn't help enough, you can also think of this as being like a map. So if you remember maps from some of the earliest lessons, they look just like this as well. So you can see that each entry in a map is a key value pair. So you can think of this as being similar. I believe the documentation refers to this as being more like a tuple, but I like to think of it as being a key value pair because the key over here is going to be unique. This is going to be a combination of the method and the URI or path. So that's going to be unique, and you can think about that as being the key. And then this is going to be the value over here, and the value is going to be our response. So I mentioned this part over here and this part right here because I want you to think about this code in that way, that you're creating a series of key value pairs. Because you're going to see as we go along in these videos, you're going to create a key value pair for every route in your application. You're going to define a route, and then you're going to define a handler, how you handle that route. So in this case, I only have one route, and what you do is you take that one route right there, and you pass that into the routes constructor, and that creates an application. So in the documentation, you'll see this referred to as an application, but really it is a collection of routes. And it has that type any and nothing again, and that's because we don't require any special environment and it cannot fail. So you could think of this as being like a list of routes, or if you prefer, you could think of it as being a map of these key value pairs kept inside of here. So either way will do, and we'll call that a list of routes for right now. So we call that app, and I use the name app right here instead of routes because you'll see that a lot in the documentation, so I'm just trying to be consistent with that. And next thing we're going to do is override the run value, just like we do any other time we implement ZIO app default. And the way you do that in ZIO HTTP is you start with the server object right there, and you call .serve on it, and you say, what I want to do is I want to serve up these routes, or I want to handle all of these routes right here. And then the only thing you need to do after that is say, I want to provide you the default server implementation. And I'll talk about this more, I believe, either in the next video or the video after that. We'll talk about what a server implementation looks like. But anyway, let me save that real quick. And again, keep in mind that we're handling this one route right there. So I'm going to stop that right there. So what I want to do is I want to run the application over here, and that one is called 100. So we'll do that, and this is all we have to do to run that application. And that works. I should scroll up here to the top because I have these using dependency things up here. So you can see I'm using ZIO, and I'm using ZIO HTTP and Scala 3. So that's the only dependencies that this application has right here. So we can see that it's started. It says starting the server, and then it says server started right here. And by default, this is going to be running on port 8080. And again, I'm just handling the /hello URI. So let me curl that. I'm going to test this. You're going to see this a lot. I'll be testing our web applications using the curl command. So let me clear that. And I will call that right there. And you can see that hello world right there. So with curl, what I'm doing is I'm saying, I want to call this URI, and if I add the -I or -v option, you can see a little more information. So -I shows you this information, so it doesn't show you the GET request, but if I make that a -v, as in Victor, then you can see the first part here is it's saying, okay, I'm trying to connect to 8080. I did connect to 8080. Here's the GET request that I was thinking of. So the first part right there matches the route pattern right here. It's a GET request on the /hello URI, so that matches that route pattern, and it comes over to our handler right there. And hopefully you've seen this type of information before. If not, this is just saying that I want to use version 1.1 of the HTTP protocol. Again, the host I'm contacting is that one right there. The user agent is me, or this curl command that I'm issuing right there, so it's curl 8.4.0. And then the // means that my client, my curl client, will accept any type of content from the server, whether that's HTML, JSON, or whatever. And when you look at this output from this -v option, the verbose option, you can see the arrows are pointing this way when we're sending the request, and then the arrows are pointing to the left when we're getting the information back from the server. So we're getting an HTTP 200 OK response from the server, and that comes from this response.txt right there. Content type is text/plain, and again, that's because this is text right here. And the date and time, or today's date and time, the content length is the length of my reply right here. And then you finally see here at the bottom, you actually see the reply from the application right there. So I know I talked about this quite a bit, but as you can see over here, this application is really, really small, isn't it? All you have to do is define the routes that you want to work with, pass those routes in over here, and then start the server, and things work over here. One more thing I want to show right now is, let's go back to the -I believe, and I want to take hello off there. So now I'm just calling the root of the server application right here. So I'm not going here, I'm just going to the root And I should mention, I'll show how to handle the root in an upcoming video. But here we go, right there. And the only thing I want to show you is that when you call a route like this one right here, that is not defined in your application. So we don't have a route over here. It's not included in routes and it's not being served by the application. Then what you're going to get is a 404 error. So I just want to be clear that if you call anything else, you're going to get that 404 error like that.